gain some helpful information that will enable you to run your program successfully. And so we'll have a few people speaking throughout the morning who will give you information that's going to help you be successful. Um, so before we get started, let me just ask you all to make sure that your lines are muted, and you don't necessarily need to have your camera on. Actually, it probably would be better if you would turn your camera off so that we can save our bandwidth. Um, so you can do that. And then let me just introduce our 21st Century team to you. And as I call your name, team, please turn your camera on so that everyone can see your lovely face. We're starting with Amy Bosch. All right, Amy, you're muted, but I think you said hello. We have Jamal Perry.
Good morning.
All right, good morning, Jamal. Shonda Pooser.
Good morning.
And then Latasha Ransom.
Good morning.
All right, thank you, thank you. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we ask that you just put them in the chat box, and we'll certainly do our best to answer them all today. So I've already asked you to mute your lines, and you can, turn your cameras off. And then today's session is being recorded. So let's get started. So let me get started by telling you some updates and giving you some important information. So from the outset, we've gotten a few questions about the start dates, whether it should be virtual or whether it should be on site. And so a lot of you are new, but as with last year, due to COVID, we as a 21st Century team had to be flexible with the sub-grantees and with their starting date and all that. And so you'll be referred to as sub-grantees for those of you who this is your first time having a 21st Century grant, or just the first time being a project director on this grant. So you'll hear that term either sub-grantee or sub-recipient, then that refers to you. So we know the challenges that the districts and the uncertainty that the districts and the schools face, due to COVID. And so some of you might not be able to start your program off face-to-face. So again, we're kind of in the same position that we were in last year. So the question has been asked, would we be flexible? And the answer is yes. But we also ask that you follow the protocols and the rules of your district. So if they are saying that you are 100% virtual, then certainly we will not expect you to run your 21st Century program face-to-face if your district and your school is virtual. Please try everything in your power to also run your program virtually. And we know that certain things might come up, but with that, we just ask that you always communicate with your assigned program manager here from the Office of the Office of Student Intervention Services, but the 21st Century Grant. So you'll be, in case you don't know who that person is, at some point, probably in the next week, you'll be getting a welcome email. We'll be introducing ourselves to you and saying that we are your program manager. And, if there's anything that you need from us, we are certainly here to help you. And then we'll give you, anything else you might need. So that will be the time at all times to always stay in communication, constant communication with your program manager. If there's anything that you aren't familiar with or you're uncomfortable doing, by all means, talk to us. That's what we're here for. So just do the best you can. We have printed, in the GAN and on the RFP itself, it said September 7th, we would like for all programs to get started, running your after school program. But we know that, COVID and the numbers going up and the situations are so fluid and they change daily. So again, just communicate and we understand, and we're here to work with you. Let's see what else. You'll be receiving, as I said, your emails. I took some notes to make sure I didn't overlook anything. And so we are here to help you, provide any kind of technical assistance you might need. So we actually want to keep today's meeting somewhat informal. So don't be afraid, to ask questions in this small setting today, because there will be another training on September 24th for all project directors. So not just your group of small, your small group of new project directors. The 24th of September is going to be for everyone. So now today would be a good time for you to ask questions if you don't feel like you'd be comfortable asking in a larger setting. So we just ask that you put your questions in the chat box. And again, we'll have someone monitoring, and then we will do our very best to answer, get you an answer. Let's see what else. You're going to be hearing an advantage of being in today's training, just with the new project directors, is that you're pretty much going to hear some of the same presentations on the 24th of September. So today, hopefully by then, some of these terms won't be so foreign to you, and you will, have a chance to have gotten familiar with them. And so you won't be so overwhelmed. Today is more or less going to be an introduction, and then we'll be answering any questions that you might have. So when we meet again with the huge group, that will be more of a formal training, and things will be going a little quicker. So take advantage of today. And again, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And we are, off to a good start, and we're praying and hoping that that everyone will remain safe and have a, successful program. And with that, I am going to get started and turn it over to Amy and Latasha, and then they'll talk about the 5 focus areas, and then we'll just roll from there. And I'll be back in and talking about some other things. But Amy and Latasha.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? We're going to get started. Hold on, I'm having a hard time getting this to advance to the next slide. There we go. So when you did your grant proposal, the application really did focus around the 5 areas that we like to measure and for the grant to focus on. And those are attendance, academics, behavior, family literacy, and sustainability. So Latasha and I are just going to kind of go through these 5 things and just kind of break them down a little bit for you, what the expectations are. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about like how COVID, you might have to modify that to meet the expectation during, the limitations with COVID. So let's go ahead and get started on attendance. That's always the most popular one. Okay, so foremost, just make sure your program is safe and inviting. We had a project director that worked here for years, and he always said, kids vote and come to your program if it's good, if it's fun, if their friends are enjoying it. So you really want to concentrate and make sure that your program's on an extension of the regular school day, that it's different, that it looks different, the environment's different. So you want it to be fun and engaging, and you want your students to come, especially those who are serving middle school and high schoolers, students that have the option to go home, the students that their parents are not using it for childcare. So you really have to work to make it engaging, challenging, and just make it fun. So, and we like to see fun. I mean, we're not coming out there to see you doing 90% of your time in academics. We want to see them, being kids, playing games, interacting. So when we come to visit, don't think that you can't have fun that day. We want to see fun. So, and it's just always really important to monitor your student attendance and retention, and just be very mindful of that, and because it's just an ongoing process. One thing that we see a lot with new programs is they don't even know what their service number is. So if you don't know, please go back to your application, look at your service number. It's usually between 50 and 100. It just depends on how your grant was written. And just know that your funding was based on that number. So if you're not serving that number, your funding may be affected. Now we know right now with COVID, that there are some limitations, and it's just going to be very important that you communicate with your grants manager about those limitations. And we were pretty creative last year, and I feel like we ran some pretty successful programs even during COVID. So, like I said, just really communicate with your grants manager, and they can help you work through any challenges you might have due to limited staff schedule, like having to have a cleaning schedule. Bus limitations is one that we dealt with a lot last year. So, and then also if you do transfer to virtual, if your school does, we had several programs run very engaging virtual programs. So just be very fluent with your grants manager about your needs. But as you can see here, I'm not going to read it to you, but as you can see here, these are some of the things that that help with a good program attendance. Of course, you got to have the family buy-in. You got to, be friendly to those parents. Let them know that you're there to help. And then also field trips and, different enrichment activities such as like karate or dance or art or music, special guests, and then program surprises for the students all year. So just engaging and so. Right, and then moving on to the academic piece. So ideally what we like to see is if your program operates for 2 hours a day, for example, we want to see half of that time, so an hour of that time being devoted to academics. And just be very mindful that your academic component can consist of the homework support. And it doesn't have to look like a regular classroom. So what we normally see is when we go out is way more than 50%, but the students as well, sometimes even the project director don't even realize that it's academically based, whether it be a game or a STEM activity. So, but you do have to make sure that you are addressing the ELA and the math during your academic components. So we like to see on the daily schedule, half of your time per day being devoted to academics. The only exception would be like maybe your Fun Fridays or whatever day you've designated as like your club day. So on that day, we do not expect to see as much. You probably still want to do a homework component for the benefit of the families, but we don't expect to see that. A lot of programs correlate that day with the day that their staff are required to attend like a staff meeting for the school. So that might be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, not necessarily always a Friday. And then also you want to make sure to look back at your application. A lot of applications had a STEM component. So you want to make sure that that's being addressed as well. You don't want your application to be written around STEM and then you're not doing any STEM when we get there. And as things hopefully return to normal and we do our site visits, whether they be virtually or on site or however that ends up looking, if you would, please make sure that we don't do our visit on a day that you're not doing academics, because we do want to see that component. And this is also the component that the ratio has to be 10-1. So it can be 20 students in a room with a teacher and an assistant, but it has to break down to 10-1. So I think that's about it for the academic and the attendance. So I'm going to go ahead and let Latasha take over, and she's going to pick up on the other components.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. And so as Amy mentioned, we're going to head on to the next level of the 5 focus areas. And so the next one that we're dealing with is social behavioral impact. And so with that, we're looking at improving student behavior through positive relationships. So we're looking more so at your regular school day. So this means you're going to engage with your regular school day teachers, and we want to be able to see a difference in the students that are participating in your after school program, seeing that they have really good behavior and that the after school program is making a difference in how they're actually also interacting within the regular school day. So some of those expectations we're looking at that you want to look for is participation. Are they respecting adults and other students? We're talking about appropriate communication, Because with your after school program, you can incorporate all of this into your after school program. So some of the things that regular school day teachers may not be able to do when it comes to the social and behavioral impact, you get to incorporate that aspect into your after school program where you can begin to see that difference. And so being able to see that those students that are regularly participating in your after school program, that they will demonstrate an additional positive social and behavioral change and hopefully reduce disciplinary referrals. So like I've seen some programs that they have within their after school program, they've given students leadership roles and they've made like a student body government, and then they've rotated it throughout the month, and somebody may be the president and somebody may be the vice president, and it just allows the students to take on a level of responsibility, and that can also trigger for them to increase their behavior, right? The only way you get to have this role is we're looking at how are you behaving, what are you modeling for other students. So that's going to be really important as you're navigating through your program, with this being one of those 5 focus areas that you want to look at. Okay, so we're going to go over to family literacy. And so the aspect of family literacy, you would have seen this when you were doing your grant proposal. This is going to be the interactive activities between parents and their children for your after school students. So we're looking at education for parents, whether that's parent education, whether it's early child care and education, but you really want to look at how are you facilitating the students learning and becoming partners in their education with their parents. And so it may look a little different this year just because of COVID and having to do things virtually. So we've had some programs that have sent project kits home to the parents, and then did a virtual session where the parents are actually creating something with their students, or they're sending home something regarding literacy, and then having parents either do a video with their student and submit that back. So it may look a little bit different, and you may have to get a little bit more creative. We've even had some programs that have done an outdoor event where each parent was at their car, but they each had a kit with their student, and they created it at their car. And so that way you were still able to social distance and still be safe, but it still was a way to engage your parents. So it's really good for you to know your parents and be intentional and actively engaging them and building that relationship with them. And so if you are able to have in person and parents are able to come in to pick up their students, if you have someone checking them out, be mindful whether that person is just sitting there saying, oh, what student are you here to pick up? Okay. And then they check off a box. But you really want to have your staff, if someone is checking out students and parents are coming in, have your staff engage with that parent while they're standing there, asking them about their day, asking them, what do you think about the program? What are some different things that you like about it, or that we could improve upon, or that you would love to see? So you can also include surveys to your parents throughout the school year, whether it's at the beginning, the middle, and the end, where you're really getting their feedback and having them to feel that they're part of this program with you. And so then you can also involve parents through a school newsletter. If that means that you're sending home a school newsletter, or if the school newsletter already has one and you're adding a section in for 21st century for parents. We've had some groups do create a Facebook group for their parents where they are posting different things of the kids. Of course, make sure you get consent from all parents if you're taking pictures and all of that stuff, but just different ways to engage them. We've seen a really great turnout when it comes to children when families are regularly participating as well in those activities. Okay. And then the 5th focus area that we want to look at is sustainability. So this is where we're talking about our community buy-in. This part is so important because in your 3rd year, that's when you lose 10% of your 10% of your funding goes down, and then 4th year another 5% goes down. But you're still responsible for making sure that you're still providing the best quality services that you were in year 1 and 2 as well. And so this is where sustainability comes in. One of the things that we will ask about when we come out for our monitoring visits is, what's your sustainability plan, right? Like, what community partners are you utilizing? And so when you have that community buy-in, you'll have different organizations that'll say, hey, we're going to provide this right here for you guys, or we're going to donate this to you. Oh, we heard that you're having a parent teacher, or not parent teacher, but just a parent night for your students. So we're a grocery store and we're going to donate 5 gift certificates for $25, right? That can be something that you can provide to your parents because you have that community buy-in and you're talking to different community businesses of being able to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're promoting this, and they're really getting involved as well. And so that helps to counter some of those costs that you're going to experience. And so even with your cost, there's also the aspect of volunteer needs where you may have those businesses that say, hey, well, we can't give anything, but we can provide volunteer services. If you have a school that's near you and they say, hey, well, we have some education students that they, need to do an internship, we can volunteer their time and they can just get credit for it in class. And so that's another way that can help your program. So we definitely want to make sure that you have a strategy in place to support program sustainability. And so we encourage you to do this in the beginning and not wait until your third year when your funding decreases, but to really look at it within the first year to say, okay, we realize our funding will decrease. And so let's go ahead in the first year and start to develop our sustainability plan of what we're going to do moving forward. So those are your 5 focus areas. We push those, we check in with you to say, hey, how are those things going? When we come out to monitor, we're looking at all 5 of those focus areas. And so we want that to also be something that stays on your mind, something that you reiterate to your staff so that your staff is aware of the 5 focus areas as well, or any partners that you may bring in to work with you, that they're familiar with what we're focusing on for the 21st Century Program. And then that way you're always staying abreast of those 5 focus areas and making sure that you're being intentional within those areas. Okay. So we're going to move on next. We're going to have Jamal Perry speak next. And he's going to talk with you about tips to establish partnerships. So Jamal, I'm going to give you control over the screen so that you can start next.
I think I got it. All right. Good morning again, everybody. And we're going to talk about establishing partnerships. Latasha kind of started talking about it a little bit, building this into your sustainability plan from day one. You should have, when your application was written, you should already have some established partners written into your grant. But it does not and it will not hurt to actively seek and add new partners because they're going to fill in those gaps or stand in the gap for you for those things that 21st Century funds cannot provide. As you're aware, these are federal funds, and federal funds have that R word in there, restrictions. So that's why we encourage you. We kind of talk about this over and over, that you need to establish a good relationship with local partners in your area. And this slide, I'm not going to read it, but there are several ways to engage and create a relationship with partners. You can set up meetings. Doesn't hurt inviting partners into your program so they can see actually what's going on in your program. When people think of after school, they think of, they may have a different idea of what after school program does, but 21st Century after school programs should be engaging and inviting and fun, and the partner would want to see that. So that may loosen those purse strings a little bit, if you will. And some of this information, or most of this information, actually came from one of your peers, Amy Clifton Keeley, if I'm not mistaken. And she has a great system in place. So that's somebody that's a great resource that I don't know if she still has a grant, but we have had in the past. Another thing she mentions or she talks about is actually having a short spiel or elevator pitch so that you can quickly talk about the program, what you're offering, what it does, how it impacts the students, how it impacts the teachers, how it impacts the community. So you can tie that all in and bring someone or make sure that you entice someone to help your program. And she also states you always want to have a list or things that you know that you need for your students or for your program in mind. Because somebody may, yeah, sure, I'm ready to help you. What do you need? And you stand there like, pencils, crayons, I'm not sure. that may be a detractor for that person. If they're ready to come on board and help you, you need to be ready with your needs list. So always maintain that running list either in your head or have it written down or in a text somewhere in your phone. She also talks about building and maintaining relationships. Once you grab that person and they're interested in helping your program, you want to do things to maintain the relationship with that person. Because once you build the relationship and you maintain it with that person, that's your mouthpiece for your program. They can go out for you and talk about your program and potentially bring in other partners for you as well. So ways to do that, have the kids write thank you notes. Creating a banner or something and put it up in your program and inviting them in to see it. Just small ways to say thank you, putting a short blast or a blurb on your social, if you have a social media presence for your after school program, you can put that information on there. But something to let them know that you appreciate the partnership that you created with them. Okay. All right, and once you create that partnership, you always want to make sure that you formalize it so that both parties are aware of what each party is going to be responsible for. So you want to get something down in writing, of course. It's going to have a date, what each party is expecting from the other, when it's going to begin, when it's going to end. Appropriate signatures should be on there. Principal, project director, the partner, signatures, should be on there as well. When you create these, when you have these partners, you also want to make sure that you meet with them regularly, just to kind of see how they're feeling about the program, how they're feeling about what they're providing, what you're providing for the students, or is there something additional that they may want to provide, or is there something else that you just want to make sure you're checking in to make sure that the partnership is working for both parties at all times. So don't just get the partnership and have the partner come in and drop stuff off or come in and do something and there's no communication between you. Okay, and this kind of goes back to the other slide that I was speaking about. You always want to make your partners feel welcome and useful. And we talked about ways for you to actually make them feel welcome. Again, use the kids, have them handwritten note versus a text. It makes a big difference. So have the kids make handwritten notes, shoot a short video and put it on your social media page to say thank you from the 21st Century Program. We appreciate you, the donation of whatever, and send that out and tag them in that so that they know you appreciate it. You're just not taking, you're giving, you're feeling very appreciative of them giving their time or whatever they've donated to you. Okay, give me 1 second. All right, so that's a little bit about partnerships, but we understand during these times that it's going to be difficult to probably do face-to-face things with partners. You also want to prepare in this time for if you have partners that normally would come into the school, that just making sure that they are seeing if they can offer their services online, some type of online platform. We've had programs that had dance programs or Zumba classes. They offered Zumba classes for their students, and the partner was able to convert that to an online or platform so the kids could still get that Zumba class, but not the face-to-face that they were used to. So we understand everything's kind of, like Joy said, everything's going to be kind of fluid right now. So just kind of have those conversations up front. Are you able to convert this to an online presence? so that we can still provide these services for the students. So those are conversations that you want to have at all times. That's why we say make sure that you meet with your partners, have some type of consistent conversation with your partners at all times. All right, we're going to move on to talking about the types of programming that you have in your various programs. If you're not aware, everybody's program looks different across the state. Everybody has different needs that they identify in their needs statement. If you have not looked at, I'll take this time to say right now, if you have not looked at your approved application, you definitely want to go through and look at your approved application, what you were approved to do, what the program, the schedule, the enrichments, and everything that you said or that was written into the grant that you said that you were going to do. And these are just a list of certain enrichment programmings that could be offered to your students. You may have enrichment programs in your listed now, but as we said earlier, the students vote with their feet. If they don't enjoy your enrichments, your programming, then you're going to see your attendance go down. So you have to constantly monitor the attendance in your program to see, okay, they're not attending this character education program, or they're not attending this karate program. What do I need to do to increase attendance? So you always need to make sure what you have in your programming now may not work. You may need to alter your program. You may, and one way you can another way to gauge what's going on in your program is to kind of do a survey with your students. It can be a formal, informal survey, just to kind of figure out, are they enjoying this? Or what other types of enrichments would you like to see? We have programs that kind of switch out enrichments every 9 weeks or just to kind of keep the enrichments and the student interest fresh, so they're not doing the same thing the entire year. Okay, next we're going to talk about field trips. Field trips are tricky, but they're very important. They kind of give the students a reward for coming to the program. You want to make sure that the field trips are educational based. We understand we want them to have fun. We're not the fun bandits. We don't want to take away that part. But you have to really be careful about the field trips that you take the students on. You just can't, for example, all the grant managers probably shake their head. We get field trips for Carowinds all the time. And the skating ring. I want to take the kids bowling. And we'll pose the question, how is this tied back? What educational basis does this field trip have? And they'll come up with something loosely based. But if you have questions about whether this field trip is approved or is it okay for me to take my students on the field trip, reach out to your grant manager and we'll let you know. But in your application packet, there may be the approved application. There should be some, or there may be some field trips that have already been included. So if there are, again, go back and read your application, see what's in it, schedule if there are field trips, and see if they're even feasible right now because of COVID. You may want to talk to the field trips have been scheduled or maybe already within your approved application packet. You want to make sure, you want to reach out to that vendor and see if they can convert it to an online presence, or if the field trip is even feasible right now. So those are things that you need. There's a lot of pre-planning that you're going to need to do as a project director to kind of stay ahead of things. And the field trips would be one of those things. Thank you, Amy. And if you don't have the chat box open, Amy typed in the field trip has to be approved prior to your trip. Okay, kind of talked about this a little bit. Again, they must have some type of academic connection and purpose, something that the kids may be studying right now. It'd be great if you could tie in something in science, and you have some type of scientific field trip for the kids, something like that. Again, the skating and the bowling, we've had that. Oh, it's tied to physics and the laws of motion. We've had all of that. Those, we can just go ahead right now and say those field trips are going to be denied. And the field trips also, you can't use them as, you can't exclude anybody. Oh, these kids had perfect attendance, so we're going to take only these kids. No, the field trip has to be open to all students, regardless. As long as they're enrolled in your program, you have to make that field trip available to all students. And this is the big thing with field trips as well. You cannot conduct the field trips during the regular school day. They have to either be conducted during the after school hours, on the weekend, or during a day that the students are not scheduled to be in school. So you can do it during the week, but the kids have to be on a holiday, or it could be a teacher work day, but the students are out. So that's the big thing about, you can't take them away from school when they're supposed to be at school. So that, I believe that's it for me. That's it for this section. Somebody asked the question, what about half days? If you can fit that in that time, then half days will work. If you can get them to and transport them back and forth to school in reasonable time, then half days will work. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box about partnerships or field trips. Shonda Pooser will be coming up next to discuss financial pitfalls.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Shonda Pooser, and just to break things up a little bit, if you have any question at all, if you don't feel like typing, just go ahead and unmute yourselves, and we can quickly answer whatever question you may have about anything that has been discussed so far. This meeting is meant to be informal, so, you know, anytime you have a question, if you don't want to type it in and you want to just go ahead and quickly ask that question, please go ahead. You can interrupt me and I will definitely answer that question. I'm here to talk about financial pitfalls. So of course, that's talking about your budget, about your monies that have been awarded. So first off, congratulations, you have your grant, okay? But it's a congratulations and it's a bit of a I'm sorry, because the I'm sorry part is there are a lot of documentation that you must, again, I say you must maintain, okay? I'm admitting some more people in quick fast. Awesome. With regard to your document, come on, right, okay. With regard to your budget, what are your responsibilities? Those responsibilities are to spend your grant funds in accordance with federal rules and regulations and your budget narrative that was submitted along with your application. Okay. Are you all hearing an echo?
Yes, we're hearing an echo.
I'm hearing it as well. I'm trying to. Is that better?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Your responsibilities are to spend your grant funds in accordance with federal rules and regulations, that's GAAP, and in accordance with your budget narrative, what was submitted along with your approved grant application. There must be a separate account. I know as project directors, many of you may not have the responsibility of maintaining the accounts for your budget, but it is your responsibility to at least oversee your budget and budget narrative. When I say oversee, you might need, that may include getting a copy of your general ledger at least quarterly to see that funds are being spent in accordance to the way you've requested. Okay. If you're a school district, I know a lot of times you have a finance office, so it's like, I don't worry about that. Well, you still need to be aware. Okay. How do you know that expenditures are allowable? Okay, first off, every subgrantee must ensure expenditures of the grant funds are made in accordance with your approved budget and narrative. The budget and narrative is attached to your approved grant application. Okay. Not only that, the approved budget has already gone through this office. If you need a copy of it, make sure you make that request of your grant manager so that you can ensure that everything that you're doing is in accordance with that approved budget narrative. Okay, any expenditures that you make, like we said, it should be in accordance with your approved budget narrative, but those funds must reflect resources necessary and directly allocable to your grant program. For instance, Jamal just mentioned various enrichment programs. If your program has a focus of character education, college and career readiness, and drug and alcohol and violence prevention, then there's no need for you to purchase musical instruments. That's not necessarily allocable to your program that you are running. Now, granted, musical instruments might be an allowable expense, but only allowable if that's something that you're doing in your grant. So therefore, it would need to be spelled out in your grant that I'm going to provide a musical program or an arts program that features music. I pray you all understand all of that. So therefore, when we say reflect resources necessary and directly allocable, that's what we mean. It must be in accordance to what you said you were going to do in your grant application. It must be reasonable for the performance of your project. When we say reasonable, if you have a physical education portion of your program, we don't necessarily need to purchase everything that you would see in a gym for your physical ed portion. Okay, when we say reasonable, jump ropes, maybe your Fitbit or something like that, those are reasonable. But when it comes to large items like I'm going to say treadmill, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to move back and forth between the regular school day and your after school program, that's unreasonable. Okay. Any expenditures must conform to any limitations or exclusions. When we talk about that, we're talking about, Jamal mentioned your field trips. Field trip to Carowinds is an exclusion. That's considered entertainment unless it's on a student education day. And that must fall on a day that the students are not in regular school. Okay. So all expenditures are considered allowable if they conform to what you are doing in your grant project. Okay. All expenditures must have a cost basis to support identification of the amount. When we say that, we mean, okay, if I'm going to purchase a computer or a Fitbit and it costs $100, we need to know I'm going to purchase 25 Fitbits at $100 each. That's showing a cost basis to identify the amount that you're requesting. Okay, if any of you have spoken with us prior to receiving your grant, when we may have asked questions about your budget, and we may say, please provide more detail. Please show how you determine this amount. That's what we're talking about, showing the cost basis. Any questions so far? Please make sure you ask. Like I said, this is very informal. Even if you want to interrupt me and ask a quick question, I will do that, okay? Expenditures must be treated consistently, okay? If you are serving 50 students, there's no need to purchase 100 Fitbits. Does that make sense? It must be consistent with what you said you would do in your grant proposal, consistent with the number of students that you're serving. Okay, so even though you may say you're going to serve 50 students or 100 students, I should say, but right now you only have 50. You don't need to purchase all 100 yet. I would suggest if you only have 50 students, maybe purchase 60, just to ensure that you have enough for students as they come in. And then later on, as you need it, you can purchase more items, but you must be consistent, okay? Just because it's in your budget narrative that I'm going to purchase 100 Fitbits does not mean you should purchase 100 Fitbits today or right now. You need to make sure you're consistent with the student population that you have, okay? All your expenditures must be categorized in accordance with GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, okay? That would be the codes that we list. Salaries must be categorized as salaries. Purchase service must be categorized as a purchase service. Okay, that would be your contracts. And of course, your salaries would be your timesheets for your teachers and other staff. Okay, any expenditure that you request should not be included as an item of cost in any other federally funded program. That means basically we're talking about supplanting here. Okay, if you have another federal program, a federally funded grant, and you have a teacher that's already being paid out of that grant and they're being paid for a full 8 hours, and that teacher comes and visits your program for 15, 20 minutes or even an hour a day, you cannot charge the additional hour to 21st Century as well as the other federally funded program. Okay, there must be a separation. And if there is an item of cost that is included in another federal program, you need to show that difference. If it's a salary, then it needs to be documented on a PAR or a personnel activity report showing the different activities. I worked on Title I in this time, and I worked on 21st Century in this time. Okay, I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. How do I know what project activities are allowable? All grant activities have already been approved with the pre-award process. Okay, basically the grant proposal that was submitted, those activities are the ones that are approved. Any changes to those activities from the grant proposal that has already been submitted and approved will require our approval. So you would need to contact your grant manager. You may have to do a program modification or get some prior approval before actually making the change. How will I get reimbursed for expenditures? We have a grants accounting processing system for reimbursements. We will have someone to come on and talk to you about that. But all grants, all grants are issued on a cost reimbursement basis. Basically, you have to spend the money before you can get it. You have to spend the money first before you can get it. If you went through a pre-award process, I'm sure auditing may have asked you about your 3 months worth of sustainable income. Basically, you need to have funds and spend those funds in order to be reimbursed. Expenditure reports, along with invoices, receipts, timesheets, backup documentation, you must maintain all of that documentation, as I stated at the beginning. All documentation you must maintain for auditing purposes or otherwise. You must maintain all of your documentation to back up any expenditure requests. Amendments and modifications. I spoke on a change in the activities for any grant program. You must get prior approval if you make any changes to your approved grant proposal. And that would be changes to the scope of work. For instance, if your focus had been college preparedness and you now want to add arts to it, that's a scope of work change. So that's something that you would need to get prior approval for, and you would need to detail why that change is needed. Any change to the school that is being served, that would be whatever. Well, what if the school name changed, or the school board decided we're going to close this school and merge with another school? That's where you would need to get prior approval for any scope of work change. That's school served, the location. If you had a flood at your location, if you operate outside of a school, if you had flooding at your location and you now had to move the students to the school or to another location, that would require prior approval, and that would require a program modification. Any changes to key staff, you need to let us know. If the project director is new or if you're leaving, you need to let us know. As project director, I'll be leaving and this new project director will be coming in. We need to know that. Transfer of funds, costs requiring prior approval, changes to your total award amount. That very rarely happens unless it's a decrease. Okay, but very rarely are award amounts increase or change. That would be a great event, but that would require prior approval. An extension or contraction of grant award time frame. For instance, we had a flood or a hurricane and your school closed for 2 weeks and you needed to extend that time to later. You would need to let us know that or ask for approval for that. And it would probably be approved because of an act of nature, but it still would require prior approval. And any change to the approved subgrant recipients. That would mean if you currently serve 1st through 3rd grade and the school board made a decision that we're going to start adding 4th and 5th grade students to the school, and now you want to serve the additional 4th and 5th graders, that would require a change, a program modification. Any questions? If you have anything, just raise your hand, use the actions to raise your hand or type it in the chat, or you can quickly interrupt me. Okay, any budget amendment request that's made through GAPS, that's our grants accounting processing system. That's a change to the amount of money from one category to another. You would need to let us know in GAPS the reason for the change, The request must contain detailed information and rationale as for the need for this change. For instance, many programs are going to be making a change because they've already been approved for a particular indirect cost rate, and the new indirect cost rates have come out. So you're going to have to change from your old cost rate to the new cost rate. That would be a budget amendment that's going to be made in gaps. And the reason is cost rate change from this last year to this year. Okay. Another thing that should be included in the budget amendment request in gaps is the impact on the budget. You will justify the decrease in this area to the increase in the other area. For instance, the decrease in indirect costs is due to the change in your indirect cost rate. You're going to increase your supplies and add it to your program supplies. So that'll be additional pens, papers, crayons, whatever that you intend to buy. Okay. In other words, you must explain why the funds are available and how you will redirect them. The items that should be included in a program modification. Program modification would be changes to your scope of work, changes to your key personnel, those items, those things that you would need to talk to your grant manager about. That's a change to the grant proposal in itself. You need to list the reason for the change, and in that you would provide all the details. The school board decided we're going to add 4th and 5th grade students. We would like to be able to serve these students. Okay. Any change must be in keeping with the intent, goals, and objectives of the RFP, your program application, and the grant award itself. So none of the curriculum will change. We're just going to serve 4th and 5th graders now as well. Okay. Any program modification requests must be sent to your grant manager. As Joyce mentioned, we'll be sending out welcome emails. Your grant manager will, and you'll know exactly who that person is, how you can contact them, and basically your relationship with your grant manager will begin upon that welcome email. Okay, that'll be the person that you contact for any question and to send program modification requests. If you have a budget amendment request, you would contact your grant manager. Can costs be disallowed? Most definitely. Any expenditure that violates the terms, conditions, and assurances of the grant award itself is over the threshold. For instance, you have $200,000 awarded and you're trying to get more. That's disallowed. Or you're trying to spend more than the actual $200,000. That's disallowed. Expenditures in unapproved line items would be disallowed. For instance, you don't have a budget for equipment, but you made an expenditure claim for equipment. That's disallowed. Okay. Any disallowed project activities, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a music program and you're trying to purchase musical instruments, they would be disallowed. Are there any questions? Okay. We will be sending out our subgrantee handbook that will provide a whole lot more information and details on everything that we've spoken about thus far. That should be coming out in the next couple of weeks, I believe. And we're not going to discuss it in our next project directors meeting, but you will have everything that you need so that you can follow along for our next project directors meeting. Are there any questions? Okay, I am going to move along I think we ought to have a break. Joyce, do you think it would be okay to have a quick break before Donna speaks, or would you rather a break after Donna speaks?
Shonda, Joyce has stepped away for a second, so whatever you guys think, whatever you think is best.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move along and let Donna come forward, and she will help you to get your program started from beginning to end, giving you some very good information. She is one of our seasoned project directors. She has been a big help to many new project directors. She makes herself available, and she is just awesome. We love her so much. She presents just about every year because we love her so. So Donna, I would like for you, if you don't mind, to go ahead and get started. I will try and pull up your document if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Share that for you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good morning. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate Shonda asking me to be here this morning. Shonda's supposed to be pulling up. This is a lot of detail, and I am just going to go through. I'm not going to reread it for you. I'm just going to touch on some highlights that I think are just very important. The first thing, I think Jamal may have touched on this, and probably Shonda and everybody else. The very first thing you need to do is you need to know your grant application inside and out. You need to know exactly what was written in there as far as expectations of your program, what you were to do, what you're expected to do as far as student attendance, your schedule, whatever you say in that grant or whatever was said that your program will do in that grant, that is what is expected of you by the State Department. So that's my first recommendation, is that you know your grant inside and out, that you know what you're supposed to do throughout the program year. Another thing that I really stress is that use your program to build relationships with your students and your parents. I express this to my staff every year. There's nothing more important and more rewarding when you get thanks from students and parents, and they will be able to tell if you're genuine or not. And I just think the success of the program with students and parents is how you relate to both of them, and it just needs to be made an effort to do that. So I'm going to just highlight some things, not necessarily in order of what's up here. And like I said, if you have questions, like Shonda said, you can ask me. My contact information is at the end of this paper. You can email me, contact me at any time. I'll be happy to share information, share forms, whatever, answer any questions. You're just more than welcome to contact me at any time. The first thing I'd like to highlight is your after-school program student enrollment. You need to really be aware of how many students that you have said that you're going to serve. We have our registration forms, our transportation forms, waiting list information. We have all of those forms listed in English and Spanish, just for, those families. So everybody's able to read and understand our what we're wanting. We also have a really good relationship with the ESOL teacher in our school, and she is always very helpful if parents still don't understand, and so she helps us to be able to communicate with them. One thing I suggest is over-enroll a little bit. You're required to have 85% average daily attendance, and sometimes that's hard, and now with COVID, it's even more difficult. So if there's any way possible, you can try to over-enroll from what your stated number of students you said you would serve. That way, if you do have numerous students out for whatever reason, that you can try to hit that benchmark of 85%. And as far as student enrollment, talking, I think a little bit later on, they'll go over AIRS, which is our program where we have to input our student attendance and everything. I suggest that you create a system, whatever works for you, to maintain the attendance and all the information that you will be required to put in AIRS. And
Donna, can I interrupt you right quick?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. The number of students that you're serving,
Right.
You are required to serve the number that you said you were going to serve.
Right.
That would be 100 students if you're going to serve 100 students. Now, 85% of that, if you are meeting at least 85%, then there is no reduction in funding.
Right.
Because
okay.
of that.
Yeah, I just meant that we just try to, when we can, over-enroll what we said, so we can make sure that we keep up with our 85% average daily attendance.
I just wanted to stress to all of our new people that, yes, you are required to serve the number of students that you said you would serve in your grant proposal. However, there is no reduction in funding, or there's no consequence if you don't serve the full 100. There is a consequence if you are serving below 85%, and that consequence could be a reduction in funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next thing I'm going to just touch on is student behavior expectations. We have our students and parents read and sign what we call student and parent contracts. Basically, in those forms, it's expectations for the students, what we expect of them every day while they're in the program, and the same thing as far as from parents, their support, make sure their child's attending every day. That way, it just kind of it gives you buy-in from the student and the parent. We just like to, at the beginning of the program and every day, we have our own set established after-school program expectations that teachers go over, and we try to reinforce those with the children every day and make it to where it's something, they know what's expected, and it's no big deal. They automatically, they know. It just kind of builds a relationship there with our students and with our parents. We try to be positive and encouraging with those expectations as well. And included in those expectations, unfortunately, it's also we have to discuss about disciplinary issues and, what we expect with children as far as behavior in the program and if they ride the bus. So they have to they need to know that information and, what our procedure is going to be if a child does, if they misbehave, what are their procedures? The student needs to know that and the parent needs to know that. So everybody's kind of on the same page as we start the year and go throughout the year. The next thing I want to highlight is about the after school program safety plan. To me, this is kind of one of the biggest things, because one of our reasons and things that we have about our program is that the students are safe here. So I really strive to try to make our program and where these children are as safe as I can possibly make it. We have a safety plan, which we basically piggyback off of from the school and the district. We modify it to our program, our school specifically, and our staff members have that. And so they kind of know what to do specifically in case of a tornado. If we have to exit the building for fire drill, we have where they're supposed to go specifically. And so we've just modified that from the regular school day. In addition to those types of that type of safety plan, we have a people sign students out, like most schools, all schools, we make sure that the person picking them up is allowed to on Power School. We check their, ID. Our doors are locked, so parents have to contact us if they want to enter the building to pick up their student. When at the end of the day, we have a daily checkoff system. That whether they ride the bus or the car. So if there is an issue after everyone leaves, that information's turned into me every day, and I can have it. Excuse me. Can I call you right back, please? Excuse me. We have, and they check that off, and so we know where our students are. Teachers are responsible for one set, assistants are responsible for another, but we know where those children are. This year, in addition to those types of safety things, we're having do contract tracing, and basically we will have the rooms, each room. Chief people will write where the students are sitting, so we know who's been by who. And unfortunately, that'll just be an added thing that we have to do, but that's also for the safety of our students. Let's see. When the other thing is that if parents have to contact us, call, or write us a note if they want their child to not come to after school, or if they need to be picked up or have a different mode of transportation home. We don't accept just the child's word for that, because we need to make sure that someone's at home. If they say, they're supposed to ride the bus, or if they leave school, we're responsible for those children unless those parents tell us otherwise. So we really try to maintain that safety aspect. The other thing I want to highlight is the family literacy plan and our advisory council. In your grant, and one of the components is literacy for parents. And at the beginning of the year, we establish one of our partners is our local library, and we have family reading nights, and then we do other programs throughout the year. So we send home sign-up sheets, we do call-up sheets, we encourage our parents to attend these programs, so for them and for their children, so we can meet the requirement of our literacy program required in the grant. On our advisory council, we meet 4 times a year. You're basically required to meet 4 times a year. The advisory council consists of school and district employees, teachers, community leaders, parents, students from the program. Everybody from that group kind of helps guide your program with input and help for sustainability. When you come to year 3, like what was discussed earlier, and beyond, that group of your advisory council is just a good sounding board and a good information board for you as you go from year 1 and beyond. So they're just a real important part of your grant, of your program. So really make use of that group. Our staff development plan for our after-school program, you can use in-services from your district if you have a lot of district and employees, but you can also bring in other speakers, things that you find that your staff may need, and everybody may not be the same thing. If your staff needs help with classroom management or just some more additional training on curriculum or just certain other areas, you can get feedback from your staff on that as to what they might be helpful to them, and just be aware of that and try to help them get additional training or what they need so they can be successful in the program. The other thing I want to talk about are the partners. Know who your partners are and your memorandums of agreements for those partners. You need to know what's stated in those and the responsibility of the partner and your program, the district. And you just need to be very aware of those. And what we do is I keep a list of the partners, what organization they are, what they contribute, and how often they contribute. That way you can just kind of keep a list and you know who's helping you and kind of who's not. You might have to end up dropping a partner and adding a new partner. It just kind of depends, but it's very important for you to know who your partners are and what they say they're going to help you do for your program, and then what you're supposed to do in return. Lastly, Shonda just got through talking about this on the budget and your finances and general ledgers. I have basically like a form, and with my purchase orders, I write them down, who they're for, and the amount and everything, to try to keep up with those expenditures and the travel reimbursements. I suggest you establish a very good relationship with your district with your finance department at your district office. They are crucial, and I suggest getting monthly, at least monthly, or however they want. Some may not, but I would suggest maybe getting monthly copies of your budget, your revenue, and your expenditures. That way you can keep up with what you're spending, and you won't get yourself into trouble with overspending in a particular area. It lets you know if you need to do an amendment and gaps for your budget. But it's just a way, though, that it gives you a lot of good where your money's going and where you need to spend your money. So, because you want to spend as much of your money as you can that the State Department's getting you, especially for the things that you said in your grant that you're going to spend those monies for. I know that was brief. That's a lot of information written down. Does anybody have any questions?
We thank you so much, Donna.
Go ahead.
Just so everyone knows that Donna has made this form available that I'm sharing on screen here, and we will email it to everyone that's attended today. We'll make it available to you. Again, Donna has given her contact information at the bottom of this document. And like I said earlier, she has been a tremendous help in this office, and she is available for peer-to-peer relationship. She'll help you get with any questions and any issues that has come up in your program. She's been very beneficial to many new project directors in that area.
I also
Joyce?
wanted to chime in. Yeah, I wanted to chime in and say, thank you again, Donna, but I would hope that you, especially your new project directors, that you will have like a lot of questions for Donna. But I know sometimes when you're new, you don't know yet what you don't know.
Exactly.
So yeah, I understand that, but pick her brain. This is the time to do it. Donna has been, a project director for over 20 years for 21st Century. So she's been there, done that. So please don't be shy by asking her questions. She is definitely an excellent resource And I know that there was a question in the chat box. Let's see. It was for Shonda, but we can certainly all answer it. Let me find my chat box question.
Yes, definitely. Donna even mentioned the question is, can you enroll more than 100 students? If your grant proposal says you're going to serve 100 students, you can definitely enroll more than 100 because enrollment versus attendance is different. You can enroll 100 students, but only have 80 showing up. So basically, Donna spoke about over enrolling. So yes, you can enroll more than 100. I would suggest enrolling 110. You know, if you don't have full attendance of the 100 students, that's what you're always working towards. So to enroll more than 100 students could help ensure that you have closer to 100 students attending daily.
And let's just say by some fluke that, you know, you get 110 students to come every day, which is unlikely, but possible. Just know you still have to walk that fine line that your grant said it would only pay for 100 students. So just, you might have to be a little mindful of that. That would be excellent if you're in a position that you have, you know, so many students wanting to come and you've over enrolled and they come all the time. So just know that the grant will, as it states, will pay for 100 students. So you might have to be in a position that you need to find funding to pay for those additional 10 students. But definitely what Donna and echo what Shonda said, you always want to maintain an attendance level of what you said you would serve. And oftentimes kids will enroll, but they don't always show up on a daily basis.
So yeah, another thing Donna mentioned was calling the parents. If you have students that don't show up to their after school program and they're scheduled to be there, again, she talked about safety of the students. So yes, you're responsible for the student. If that child is enrolled in your program and they don't show up and you haven't heard from the parent and they were in school that regular day, then yes, you want to know where that child is. So if that child is not going to show up, I think Donna mentioned you may have to talk to the parent about dropping that student and putting someone in who will show up. But definitely to cover yourself as an after school program that you have a child enrolled in and that child doesn't show up, the parent may not know it. So you definitely want to stay in contact with your parents in that area.
Mm-hmm. And I know that we're actually a little ahead of schedule. So Donna, go ahead, Donna.
I was just, one other thing that I meant to touch on was about the procedure manual. And I know that's like toward the end of my notes here. The procedure manual is very, very important. And I've listed down, you know, explained how we have it, we break it down, and it's pretty much very detailed, but that is information when you get monitored that you are required to have and to be able to show when your grant manager comes either virtually or, you know, in person. This is information that you're required to have and maintain for your program. So this is, the procedure manual is a very important part and piece of the documentation that you're required to keep for the State Department.
And Donna, also, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit more. The two things I want you to kind of expound upon.
Okay.
So say that you are in the shoes now of a brand new project director and they're getting ready to be monitored on site for the first time by our program manager. Kind of walk them through, you know, the mindset that they need to be in and what they need to be getting prepared for.
Okay. All right. Well, I kind of treat every time like, you know, it's kind of the first time, but basically what I do is I get my grant and I get my RFP, because in your RFP, it says, all the information that you need to keep. And so when you get your project director's handbook, it also tells you in there. So I go through and I make a list and of everything that they're going to need. Your grant manager will send you before they come, a listing of what they're going to look for and what they're going to check, to check you off. I go through and I start at page 1, and whatever the documentation, what they're saying, like in attendance, if they want to see your attendance rosters and whatever, I check those off and I get all those information and I make sure I have that. And so then the day when they come, Shonda's been my person for many years. So when she comes, she's probably like, I have all my my notebooks. I have them earmarked as for each section, what section 1 documentation, I earmark that. So when she goes through her list and says, okay, show me attendance rosters, I can go right there to that. And I just try to make sure from the monitoring report that they send us, I try to make sure I have every bit of documentation that's required on a particular section. I have that to show proof of what we've done that we're supposed to be doing.
Okay. So then when Shonda comes on site, again, it's never, our aim is never to say, I got you. Our aim is always to be working with our sub-grantees to make sure that you're successful.
Right.
When you're successful, it trickles out to we're successful. And so although we monitor you, well, the U.S. Department of Education monitors us. And so they are looking at our programs as a whole and saying, how are your programs being run? And they also in turn tell us when they're coming or when they're going to have a call and what information that they're expecting to see from us. So we do the same for you. You're never caught off guard. We're never just going to show up and say, see? So
absolutely.
No, it's never
and
that. We're always there.
The best time is being able to walk around and show what we actually do, and in the afternoons. That's the best part. The information and the paperwork and everything, that's that can be a little bit stressful, just making sure you have all your ducks in a row and everything that you're supposed to have. But the most enjoyable time is like taking Shonda around to show her what's going on actually in our program with the children. So we enjoy that.
And then also when we're on site, we typically interview a few students. That can be chosen by, the project director, maybe representing a grade or what have you. And we'll just ask them a series of questions. How are you enjoying the program? What would you change differently? Have you been on any field trips? And so, have you seen your grades increase? So those kinds of things. And then we'll interview, an administrator or maybe a partner, just to get a feel overall how the program's being run and what things might need to be improved or what things you're doing, in an excellent way. So thank you, Donna, for that. And then one last thing. Last year, during COVID, was everybody had to do a pivot at a minute's notice because of, the numbers increasing. How did you manage to still maintain, the excellency of your program during those stressful times? And when did you have to do virtual, and how did you manage that?
Well, fortunately, we were able, it was stressful, but we had some very dedicated staff, because with a lot of what we did, we weren't able to use school day staff. So fortunately, I have a lot of retired teachers that came in. And what we did was our district took up shared part of the funding, because as you know, 21st century funds are to be used after the normal school day. So what we did was we had a small group and we were allowed to just do third grade. And we pushed into classrooms at the end of their day. And we were able to do reading and math tutoring with these students. We did small group. We were able to more closely do aligned with what they were doing during the school day. We were able to keep those children after school as well because of delayed buses, from the regular school day, and parents delay in picking the children up. So our teachers, everybody, even I had a class. So that was, we all pitched in so we could do what we needed to do to serve these students. But we found it very rewarding. And a lot of what we learned last year, we're putting into this year. So a lot of the techniques and things. So that was very good. We did have to shut down a couple of times. And what we did, we had packets, and we sent home packets, with the kids, just things that they could, not like schoolwork stuff, but things that them and their parents could do together. We'll still do those types of things this year, especially if we're not able to have any family literacy, programs or anything face to face. We're planning on doing those same types of things for our students and parents this year. But we were very blessed to be able to pretty much go the entire year of going into classes, at the end of the day, and keeping those students separated and maintaining tutoring and all, and helping them with things that they needed help with during the regular school day.
And so, Donna, I see a question. I think you just answered it, but someone just asked, was this done virtually? So I think you just said you were fortunate. Well, I'll let you answer.
Right. Yes. Most of ours, we didn't do anything virtually. When we weren't here at school, we did the packets and stuff. And like I said, I think there was one time where we were out for a couple of weeks. We were very fortunate not to have to shut down very much more than that. But when we did shut down, we sent home packets with stuff for the parents and the children to do while they were out.
And there's a follow-up question. Would shipping costs be covered? Yes, you can use 21st Century funds to ship out those packages if the parents aren't able to come to the school, however you deem necessary. Yes, right. We will. Okay. Any other questions?
With regard to that, if it's not in your budget narrative, you do need to contact your grant manager to ask about that prior to, as far as postage or covering shipping that may not already be included on your budget narrative. Make sure you contact your grant manager to ensure that would be allowable.
Okay, and then let me tell you one of the reasons why. In a little while, Melissa Myers is going to come on and talk to you from an audit standpoint. And so Shonda has been an auditor in the past. So one of the things that they'll look at when they come to audit your program, they'll look at your budget narrative, and then they'll start looking at your expenses, and then they'll see that there's postage, and then they'll look at your budget narrative, and they won't see anything that says that you could use your funds for postage. Although it's allowable, like Shonda said, it needs to be incorporated into your budget narrative, which means if it hasn't already been so, then contact your project director here, just so we can have everything already documented, already in writing, so there won't be any questions. Okay.
And all Joyce, right. One thing that we did was, we were kind of we kind of had a little bit of a heads up on if we were going to be out, if we were shutting down. So a lot of our stuff, we sent home with students prior to, us being shut down. When we knew that they were going to be, out for a couple of days, or if it was a week or whatever, we would, if we didn't do postage, we sent it home prior to. So You just kind of have to be in contact with your principal and assistant principal and kind of let them keep you in the loop. That's where having a good relationship with your school administration, so you can kind of get ahead and not be caught off guard at the last minute.
Right. Great questions. Anyone else have any other questions for Donna before she leaves? Let's see, someone else just put something in the chat box. That was going to be, okay. Right, it had to be in the budget. All right, so if there aren't any other questions, now's the time, put it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask a question. If not, we're going to say thank you to Donna, as usual, so much for giving your experience and your input and your resource. And I think someone else has another question. Oh, she wanted to know if the recording will be sent out. Yes, it will be. Yes, it will be. All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right, let's take a 5-minute break and then we will come back and start up again. All right, see you in about 5 minutes. We'll see you at 10:41.
Hi, Tracy.
We'll give everyone another minute and then we'll get back into it. All right, very good. All right, next up we have Ms. Pearlie Gant, who is with the Grants Accounting Office here at the Department of Ed. And so we're going to turn this over to Pearlie, and she will talk to you about our automated system for our processing payments. Pearlie. Pearlie, I'm not sure if you're speaking. If so, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'd like to say good morning to everyone. This morning, I'd like to speak with you all about the grants accounting processing system. Excuse me. This system is very important in that
Pearlie, you're
Pearlie,
muted.
you're muted.
here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay.
Pearlie, you're muted again.
For some reason, it's jumping back and forth. Grants accounting processing system. Good morning to everyone. This is the particular system that we use to reimburse you for the expenditures that you have incurred during your particular contract period of your award. This system is very important, and I feel like it's very user-friendly once you get a handle on it. And so far, that's the comments that we've received from most people. So therefore, today, as being part of the system, it's a
Ms. Pearlie, you just muted again. Pearlie?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm trying to move along on the screens here.
Okay, to move along, just press the enter key.
It's not coming up. Okay. There must be 3 roles assigned in order to operate within this GAP system. First of all, you need to have the grant coordinator role, and this particular person enters the budget amendments. The person with the finance role approves the budget and also enters expenditures. The finance approver, the third person, approves the expenditures. There must be at least one different person assigned to each role for a total of 3, at least 3 people. In other words, one person cannot have more than one role on the same grant. So that's very important. There are times when we get problems when people have been assigned 2 roles on the same grant. That will cause issues and you will not be able to perform the task that you need to perform.
Early,
You're
you're
muted
muted.
again.
Must create an account in the SCDE Member Center. And we require that once you established who you want to be assigned to the 3 different roles, we need you to send us their names, their email address, and the role that you have assigned. And once we receive that information, we will go into GAPS and create the roles per your specified individuals.
Early, we can't hear you.
My systems, something's happening this morning, but whenever you're working on a particular grant in GAPS, you will need to go in. This screen just gives you how it will look, the admin tab where you would go in and you would select your grant, your sub-grant listing, the entity, and this just gives a feel for what you would be expecting once you start operating in GAPS. This particular master data screen, the information is basically taken from your GAN. Want to point out 2 things. First of all, the award period, the from and the to dates for the grant award. This is very important. You need to keep that date in front of you. The final report date is the date in which you have the last date that you have to have your expenditures in GAPS. The sub-grant award period is the period in which you need to be able to spend your funds during that particular period. One thing we want to point out, it's important to have your budget set up. Your budget must be totally allocated. In this particular example, for instance, you have been given $78,000. In this particular screen, none of it has been budgeted. So we need to have these funds budgeted. You cannot begin to enter any expenditures at all until your budget is fully budgeted up to the total amount of your allocations. In this sample here, you'll see where you have your allocation amount, the budgeted amount, and unbudgeted amount. So in this particular example, full allocation has been done. Every penny has been budgeted, so that's what we want to see. If you're, again, we get calls and emails stating we're having issues trying to move to the next step. And the reason is we always ask to go back and make sure that you have fully budgeted all of the award money. And in this case, it has been. The status of the budget approval, you'll be able to see this from your end. In this example, it has been approved. So your program office will be the ones to approve your budget, not the finance office. That's also important to remember. Once your monies have been budgeted, you can begin to enter expenditures. And it's important that in order to enter the expenditures, the person with the finance role will be able to enter the expenditure. The coordinator person who's in charge of creating the budget, cannot enter expenditures. The person with the finance role will be the one that has to be able to enter the expenditures. The entry is done through the finance tab. Again, the entry will not be accepted if the budget isn't available. So you have to have the money available in order to enter the expenditures. Once this is done, it will go down to the workflow down to the South Carolina Department of Finance, Grants Accounting section. And whenever we see the expenditures, we will go in and approve those expenditures unless we have to have prior consent, which we do on some of the entities in 21st Century. We have to get prior approval either from Jamal or some of the others in that department before we can go ahead and approve the expenditures. There are different reports available in GAPS. You have two types of reports: your budget, which you can be able to go into GAPS and pull a budget report. You can have an expenditure report summary, which will just tell you all of the expenditures you have made over a particular period of time. So all of those reports are available in GAPS. And if there's any need for us to go in to assist in getting those reports for you, we'll be glad to do that as well. This particular screen just gives an example how it would look in GAPS, where you would go in. If you wanted to look at the budget, just go in under the admin tab and pull up budget report. Go down to the drop down box and you can do a budget summary, budget details, whichever you desire. And you can pull that particular report up and it will let you know how much money you've already spent, how much balance is remaining. And so therefore you can stay abreast of where your monies are. And that's very important so that you will not be overspending. This screen just gives an example how you'll go in and access those reports. This is just an example of, again, going in to retrieve a budget report. This example here gives you an idea how, instead of doing a budget report, you would just go in and do an expenditure report. And this, again, will let you know all of your expenditures for a particular period of time, a particular quarter. You can pull that information. So there's a lot of information that can be extracted from GAPS, which will be very helpful, especially it's helpful for us and helpful for us in terms of making sure that we are able to assist whenever you call with issues that may be going on. We can also pull these reports and let you know the status of the award. We do reimbursement of expenditures. Weekly payments are processed on Wednesday, which is the cutoff for expenditures entries. This will include anything during that week up until 5:00 p.m. on Friday afternoon. Tuesday mornings, we run reports and we do our weekly cash draw. And Wednesday, you should have your checks go out, or if you have direct deposit, we try and have that set date for on Wednesdays. Naturally, there are things that can change this. If there are holidays, any unforeseen circumstances may impact this normal process. So therefore, it is subject to change, but for the most part, we were able to pretty much stay on that particular pattern. If you have any questions that are related to budgets or budget amendments, you can contact your program office. If you have any questions regarding expenditures or expenditure refunds, you can contact the Grants Accounting Office. Whenever you do contact us with any type of issues, we ask that if you could please send us a screenshot of what's going on. That will certainly help us to try and figure out the issue and also trying to find a resolution for the issue. So therefore, it's very helpful when you send a screenshot along with your email. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we can run reports for you if we need to. You're always welcome to send emails to the Grants Accounting email box. This box is monitored all day, and chances are if you hear back from someone more quickly when your question is submitted through this box. In addition to that, we prefer you do this because it also allows us to maintain a tracking system so we can watch for potential issues that may be affecting multiple users, so we can begin troubleshooting the issue. So that's another reason why we prefer that you send everything through the Grants Accounting mailbox. We also have training tutorials and video presentations can be found on our website. So feel free to go out and look at those and listen to those. We found that they have been very, very helpful. So we encourage you to do that, even if you, well, I would say, especially those videos out there that pertain to the role that you may have, coordinator role, then find that particular video and go out and listen to it and go through the process. And I believe this will be very helpful for you in the long run. Okay. This concludes my presentation. Basically gives you an overall view of what we're about and what the Grants Accounting Processing System is about as well. So we ask that you please feel free to send your emails for any questions or any comments that you may have.
Pearlie, before you get off, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah.
All right. So do any of the project directors, there is an echo, have questions for Pearlie? If so, either put them in the chat box or unmute yourself and just ask. All right. If there are not any questions, thank you so much, Pearl.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Melissa Myers, who is the Director of the Office of Audit and Services here at the department. And I'm going to ask Melissa to come on and talk to you about what's going on in the world of auditing and what you can expect as a subgrantee. Melissa.
Good. I guess it's still morning. Yes. Good morning, everyone. And thank the 21st Century Office again for allowing me to come in to perform this presentation. Okay, trying to advance here.
Melissa, if you click on the screen and then hit enter, you should be able to do it. Got it?
Okay.
Yep, that was it.
All right, thank you. So I have a few discussion topics for you all on today. First, I'm going to speak with you about 2 CFR Part 200, which is the Uniform Administrative Regulations for Federal Awards. And then I'm going to talk to you about some annual requests that we have for information. The limited scope audits that is performed by the Office of Auditing Services, adequate supporting documentation, comment audit findings and results, indirect costs, and then I'll provide you with some resources. Okay, so first 2 CFR Part 200. 2 CFR Part 200 is the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal audits. You will hear this referred to sometimes as the Uniform Grant Guidance or the UGG. It is a consolidated uniform set of rules for non-federal entities, including state and local governments, Indian tribes, institutions of higher learning, and nonprofit entities. At one time, each type of organization had a separate set of federal regulations, but back in, I think it was about 2004, some years ago, they were all consolidated into one set of uniform regulations. That's now why we have the UGG. Okay, so one requirement listed in 2 CFR Part 200 is an audit requirement that states that non-federal entities that expend at least $750,000 in federal funds must have a single audit performed each year. A single audit is an audit of your financial statements as well as an audit of your federal awards. So any non-federal entity, be it a state agency, a non-LEA IHE, if you expend at least $750,000 in federal funds, you must have a single audit performed for that fiscal year. The Uniform Grant Guidance also requires several written procedures, and I'm going to just talk about some of them on this morning. So one required written procedure is a procedure for determining the allowability of costs in accordance with your federal cost principles and the terms and conditions of the federal award. When we are conducting an audit, we will expect to see this required written procedure. So just ask yourself, well, how do I make sure that whatever I'm spending these funds for is an allowable cost, and have that actually documented in your procedures. Procedures for cash management are also required under 2 CFR Part 200. And with this cash management procedure, we're expecting to see how you are doing your timely requests for reimbursement of expenditures. Like at the Department of Education, we require quarterly reimbursement. So that's one thing that we would expect to see actually written in your procedures. You also must have documented procedures for procurement, which reflect your federal, state, and local laws and regulations. So again, when coming to do an audit, we will expect to see written procurement procedures. Also, you must have standards of conduct covering conflicts of interest and for governing the performance of its employees engaged in the selection, award, and administration of contracts. What are you doing to make sure that there are no potential conflicts of interest in your procurement policies? There are also some mandatory disclosures that are required under 2 CFR Part 200. You must disclose in writing in a timely manner all violations of federal criminal law involving fraud, bribery, or gratuity violations potentially affecting your federal award. And again, this is just some of the major ones that have highlighted here, but just make sure that your grants manager, your federal program officer, becomes familiar with 2 CFR Part 200 for additional required written procedures and other requirements, and make sure that you are complying not only with having the written procedures, but also following what you have written in your procedures. Also, 2 CFR Part 200, I'm going to highlight this. It says that an official authorized to legally bind the non-federal entity must certify on annual and final fiscal reports or vouchers requesting payment. And I just want to make sure, I'm gonna read this because I want you to make sure the severity of what it is that this person is certifying and agreeing to do. It says, by signing this report, I certify the best of my knowledge and belief that the report is true, complete, and accurate, and the expenditures, disbursements, and cash receipts are for the purposes and objectives set forth in the terms and conditions of the federal award. And make sure you look at the bolded part. I am aware that any false, fictitious, or fraudulent information or the omission of any material fact may subject me to criminal, civil, or administrative penalties for fraud, false statements, false claims, or otherwise. And that language is specifically written in the Code of Federal Regulations 2 CFR Part 200. So if you are signing off on these fiscal reports, on these expenditure claims, on certifying through GAPS, make sure that you are aware of what this language is saying, that you are certifying that it is true, it is accurate, and you know that you could be subject to criminal or civil charges if you are signing and you know that is not accurate information. So annual request for information. If you are a non-LEA, every year the Office of Auditing Services will send you a memo and a federal program questionnaire. The federal program questionnaire is an internal control questionnaire, and you're asked to complete that questionnaire and submit it back to us in the required deadline. Also, we ask for you to submit to us any report that has been made of your entity's operations during the fiscal year that's in question. And remember what I said earlier, if you expended $750,000 or more in federal awards, that annual audit report should be a single audit report. So I understand that for some reason, some entities may not have had an audit performed. And if not, then you are required to submit year-end financial statements to us. If you don't have the year-end financial statements, then submit the IRS Form 990. If you don't have that, then your general ledger or your bank statements. And how you see it listed here, you know, is the hierarchy of how we want to see that information sent into us if you do not have an audit report. If you are an LEA or a school district, each year there is a requirement for school districts to submit their audit report through the LEA audit reporting system, which is commonly known as LARS, to the Office of Auditing Services. It's always due by December 1st, with the exception of last year, where extensions were granted because of COVID. But we do know that extension will not be granted this year. So by December 1st of this year, if you are an LEA, you must submit your annual audit report through the LARS system to us. If your audit report has a finding that's related to the 21st Century Program, our office will submit a copy of that finding to the Office of Student Intervention Services, and they will review that finding. They will review the corrective action plan and issue a management decision on that finding, which will basically say if they agree with the finding that was written by the auditor, if they agree with the corrective action that you have implemented, and they will determine if you are on track or not on track with meeting that corrective action for the finding that was noted. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about our limited scope audits. Each year, we use a risk-based approach to select subrecipients for audits. Audits can also be performed by request of the program office. The objective of our limited scope audits is to determine whether your use of grant funds was allowable, necessary, reasonable, and allocable based upon the grant award agreement and state and federal laws and regulations. And of course, we also are checking to make sure that you have adequately documented your expenditures as well. So there are two ways that the limited scope audit can be performed. First could be by a desk audit, and that means it's been performed at our offices. You will be asked to submit your written policies and procedures, your general ledger, and documentation to support a sample of expenditures. And again, remember those written policies and procedures, it will include the items that I said earlier that is required under the Uniform Grant Guidance. If we do an on-site audit, it will be conducted at your location. Prior to us coming out, we will ask for you to submit written policies and procedures and your general ledger, and we will review that information while we are in the office. And then once we come on site, we will ask you for additional documentation so that we can meet our objectives. Advance notification will be distributed to your entity for either type of audit. You know, we don't do surprise visits, so you're going to know, exactly when we're coming. You're going to know what audit period that we're looking at and what documentation has to be submitted or available to us. Okay, so I talked about adequate supporting documentation a few times already, so I'm going to tell you what I actually mean by adequate supporting documentation. If we are reviewing a claim for reimbursement, and on that claim you requested reimbursement for payroll and employee benefits, we are looking for timesheets for your hourly employees to be maintained and submitted to us for review. Also, if you have any employee that is paid from federal funds, that employee must maintain an additional time and effort documentation. Now, that time and effort documentation can be in two forms, either a personnel activity report or a semi-annual certification. And the difference between the two, if the employee worked solely on one single cost objective, and by cost objective I mean program function, you have an employee who works just on the 21st Century Program, and that employee does nothing else, then all that employee would need to do is have a certification that shows every 6 months that they only work on the 21st Century Program. And it will just look as such. I, Melissa Myers, certified from January 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2021, that I solely worked on the 21st Century Program. The certification must be signed by the employee, and also it should be signed by the supervisor or someone with first-hand knowledge of what the employee's duties are. Say the personnel activity report is used for employees who work on multiple cost objectives. Say you have someone who work on both 21st Century and then worked on Title I as well. Then every month that person should have a personnel activity report that shows the distribution of his or her time during that month. And there are examples of these documents in a guidelines memo is referenced in the resource section, and you can pull up that guidelines memo to see examples of a PAR and a semi-annual certification. Also, for payroll, we will request a copy of your payroll registers, your labor history reports, the pay stub, a salary agreement, a job description, and documentation of the benefit rate that was charged for each type of benefit. Okay. If you have a claim for purchase services, that means contracts, we will look for contracts that would include the period of performance or the dates, a detailed description of services to be rendered, a contract amount or your payment terms, authorized signatures, invoices to support payments made, and timesheets. So if you claimed expenditures on the purchase services, that's the type of information we'll look for to be included in a contract. If your support, if you claimed reimbursement for supplies, we would expect for you to provide us with a copy of a purchase order, purchase requisitions, invoices or receipts, goods receipts, and packing slips. So we have lots of online ordering now, and so if you're ordering online, we expect to see a packing slip to support what was actually purchased. So I'm going to discuss with you some of the common audit findings and results of findings that we have seen. One of the common audit findings is that there is a lack of required documentation to support personnel salary costs. That means we're not seeing the time and effort documentation, the PARs or the certifications, whichever is required based on the employee's cost objectives. Some instances we are not seeing the time sheets, and we just don't have proper support for the salary costs. We also commonly see that supporting documentation does not adequately support your non-personnel costs submitted for expenditure reimbursement. Say you might have a claim for $10,000 for non-personnel costs, so we might get only $7,000 worth of receipts to support that expenditure. Also, we see where charges were made for unallowable costs. Again, I talked about having a written policy on allowability to show how you are able to make sure that you expend funds for allowable expenditures. But so make sure you have the written policy and you're following that written policy. Make sure you're familiar with the terms and conditions of the grant. Make sure you know what allowable expenditures are. And if we see where you spend money for something that's unallowable, we will cite it as a finding, and you will have to pay that money back as well. We also see failure to adhere to the approved budgets. Pearlie probably talked about budget amendments in her presentation. If you have an approved budget and for some reason you see where you have to spend your money a different way, you should submit a budget amendment to the program office, and after they approve it, then you can deviate from the original budget. But we see instances where entities do not adhere to the approved budget. Another common audit finding we see where the expenditure report was submitted for reimbursement before expenditures were both incurred and paid, or in other words, you made a claim in advance of spending. The 21st Century Grant is a reimbursable grant, which means that you have to incur the expenditure first and pay the expenditure first before you make a claim. And again, if you make expenditures in advance, that is another unallowable expenditure and that you would have to reimburse the SCDE for as well. We've also seen inadequate internal controls over equipment purchase with grant funds. If you're purchasing equipment must be properly tagged. There are several requirements for assets purchased with federal funds, and we see where some recipients do not follow those required procedures for equipment. We also see where required written procedures under 2 CFR Part 200 are either not present or it omits the required language. And in addition to this, I could say also that you have written procedures, but we see that where those written procedures are not being followed. Also, we note where expenditures incurred and paid outside of the period of availability, which means prior to the effective date of the grant or after the grant period ended. If your grant is from June through July, you should only spend from June to July. We should not see expenditures in August. You must spend within the actual period of availability, which is noted on your grant award notice. So what happens once we note these findings? You will be required to submit a corrective action plan for the findings that were noted. You would have to repay the funds back. It's possible that you could have negative press coverage of the audit. It's possible that you could be reported in the Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System, where it's a system where other potential grantees or grantors could see that you had these audit findings and that you did not meet the terms and conditions satisfactorily for another grant. It's possible that your entity could be suspended or debarred from receiving future federal awards. It's also possible to be turned over to SLED and or the U.S. Department of Education's Inspector General, and we have had instances where this has occurred. So I want to just tell you about a few of the audit findings that from the Office of Auditing Services. In September of 2019, we issued a final audit report to a non-LEA that was awarded 21st Century grant funds to operate an after-school program at multiple sites. We found several instances where the entity sought reimbursement for charges that were unallowable, inadequately documented, unnecessary, unreasonable, and unallocable. As a result, this entity had to pay back an amount of $255,000 back to the Department of Education. This was just in the news a few months ago, and this is another audit that was performed by the Office of Auditing Services. We performed an audit of the Sumter County School District's use of CERDEP funds, and CERDEP is a 4K program for fiscal years 2015-16 and 2016-17. The district was cited for charging unallowable, unnecessary, and unreasonable expenditures in the amount of $176,922.79 to the program. These purchases, again, remember this is a 4K program, so these purchases included items that should be used by adults instead of students, such as hammocks, adult tricycles, cookware, carports, etc., as well as reimbursements for unreasonable trainings that were provided by the program director at a rate of $125 per hour. So after we issued this audit report, it was turned over to SLED, and SLED further investigated this matter, and the early childhood director was indicted. She pled guilty in June of this year to the state grand jury charge of accepting rebates and extra compensation and misconduct in office. She was sentenced to concurrent sentences of 7 years in prison, suspended upon 5 years probation, and was ordered to pay $80,000 in restitution. And she did admit to duplicating the timesheets to allow herself to be paid $125 per hour in addition to her regular salary. Okay, this is another audit that our office performed that ended up being turned over to the U.S. Office of the Inspector General. This was an elementary school who had 21st century charges as well. The 21st century grant, excuse me, and they charged $65,523 of unallowable and $139,741 of unsupported costs to the 21st century grant. The unallowable costs consisted of computer purchases erroneously charged to the grant more than once, salaries paid to employees who did not even work on the grant, expenditures for an event that occurred before the start of the program, which is advanced costs, unallowable charges for food, and unsupported costs consisting of payroll charges that were not supported by PARS, undocumented charges for a field trip in the amount of $14,000, and admission fees. In June of last year, we issued a final audit report to a non-LEA that was awarded a 21st Century grant to operate an after-school program at multiple sites. We found where the entity did not comply with the grant award agreement and federal and state and laws and regulations, and as a result, we requested reimbursement in the amount of $45,440.81. And another similar instance in April 2018, another audit issued by our office for a 21st Century program who had an after-school program at multiple sites. Again, several instances where the entity sought reimbursement for charges that were unallowable, unallocable, unnecessary, and unreasonable. And as a result, this entity had to reimburse us an amount a little over $47,000. So just know that, you hear it say that you will be audited. Really, you will be audited. So make sure that you are maintaining all of your documentation and that you have it available and you are charging costs to allowable purposes. So also want to speak about indirect costs. So what are indirect costs? Indirect costs are those expenses of doing business that are not readily identifiable with the activities of a grant or contract, but are nevertheless incurred for the joint benefit of those activities and other activities or programs of the organization. And some examples include accounting, auditing, budgeting, payroll, human resources, and purchasing. An entity may charge indirect costs to a federal award by using a negotiated indirect cost rate, and make sure that, very important, you cannot double dip. In other words, you cannot charge the same cost as direct costs, but then charge indirect costs on them as well. So we have authority from the U.S. Department of Education to negotiate indirect costs for LEAs, and we automatically calculate the indirect cost rate for our school districts once we receive the information that's due to us by December 1st on the template. In LARS, it does the calculations for us for the unrestricted and restricted indirect cost rates. The restricted rate is applied to all grants with the supplement not supplant clause. The 21st Century Program does adhere to that supplement not supplant clause. So if you are charging indirect costs to your 21st Century Program, you must use the restricted cost rate. An entity must have its own indirect cost rate before it charges indirect costs to a federal award. At one time, a subrecipient could use the rate for the partnering agency, but that's no longer allowed. So you must have your own indirect cost rate. And we have been noticing some instances where we've noticed that some 21st century entities are charging indirect cost rate, but have not applied for an indirect cost rate from the Office of Auditing Services. So if you do not have a restricted rate from a cognizant agency and you plan to charge indirect costs to the 21st Century Program for this fiscal year, you must request a rate from us, the Office of Auditing Services, to use on the grants awarded by the SCDE. And we understand that some of you may be aware that there is a 10% de minimis rate that's included in the UGG. But again, like I said earlier, the supplement not supplant clause is applicable to the 21st Century grant, and that 10% de minimis rate does not apply to grants with that supplement not supplant clause. You must use a restricted rate. So again, if you want to charge indirect costs to your 21st Century Program and you don't already have a restricted rate, you must request one from the Office of Auditing Services so we can do a calculation for you to use. And to begin the process of negotiating a restricted indirect cost rate, you have to submit the following information to us: financial statements as of your fiscal year end, that we want your audited statements, the general ledger for the time period, an organizational chart, a schedule of total funding, which will include all funding received, not only from the SCDE, but your total funding from everyone, your IRS Form 990, your chart of accounts, and a list of equipment purchased, including the dates and amounts during the most recent fiscal year. Once we receive your information, we'll work with you to get questions answered, because we will have some questions as we review your documentation, and we will make sure that we exclude the unallowable costs and remove any specific costs that we need to remove from the indirect cost pool, such as equipment and any unused leave payouts. Yeah, I mentioned some resources earlier. You've heard me talk about UGG and 2 CFR Part 200. The link is there for the 2 CFR Part 200. I strongly encourage you to click on it and become familiar with it so you'll know federal grant requirements. the SCDE funding manual. The link is there for our funding manual. Make sure that you list it is a list of all the funding information. It shows allowable expenditures and allowable accounts for programs passed through the SCDE. So there's a page in the funding manual that's just specifically for the 21st Century Program. Go to that page in the funding manual. Look to see what's listed as allowable expenditures, and allowable expenditures will tell you what codes that you should be using to charge these allowable expenditures. Then there's the SCDE Financial Accounting Handbook. So if you are unsure of the definition of a function code or an object code, then you can review the Financial Accounting Handbook, and that will assist you with showing what accounts you should be using for charges. And the guidelines memo, guidelines for retaining documentation to support expenditures memo. I keep always to say guidelines memo, but it's a very comprehensive memo, and it tells you specifically what type of documentation should be maintained when you're claiming reimbursement for your federal funds. We update this memo normally around this time of year, and once we update it, we will let the program offices know that it has been updated so they can share it with the subrecipients. Any questions?
All right. I don't see any questions, Melissa. So
Okay.
thank you. Oh, I see your contact information up as well.
Yes. Feel free, if you think of something later, you can always contact me or Hershula Davis, and we'll be happy to provide you with any information that we can.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Ivana. She is a representative from our state evaluation team, which is called American Institutes for Research. We refer to them as AIR. And you will soon find out, if you have it, that if you've been funded by a federal government, that there a federal grant, that there are data elements that you definitely need to keep track of, because we have to in turn put this information in our federal system. So Ivana is going to give you an overview of our system through them, and then she'll kind of tell you, what's needed, and maybe perhaps some training dates in the future, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Ivana, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay with y'all. And I also have my colleague here with me, Isabel, and she'll be able to answer the questions that I do not know the answer to. So if that's okay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. My name is Ivana Parga, and if Isabel wants to introduce herself, I'll let her right now. Hi, Isabel. And we're with AIR. As you mentioned, one of our primary tasks associated with the 21st CCLC program in South Carolina is that we are a statewide evaluator. And overall, for this presentation, our objective is to give you guys a brief introduction to our data hub and data submission requirements, and why we collect, where you can put in all that information. So I'll just briefly do an introduction and go over the purpose of the data hub, show you guys a quick demo and some important dates. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'll be able to direct you to that. Like we mentioned, my name is Ivana Parga, and I'm here with Isabel. We have another person on our team named Samantha, who will most likely be conducting your longer trainings. Since this is a brief overview, we'll be going into more information with her later. She's the project director of the statewide evaluations. And we also have Femi Vance, who is supporting in continuous improvement efforts and training, and also provides technical assistance. So we have three main purposes that surround the data hub. One of our main purposes regards federal data submissions. So each year, all 21st CCLC programs across the country are required to submit data to the federal government as a requirement to their funding. In that data hub, that I'm going to show you, we collect the required data elements that are specified by the U.S. Department of Education. And by using our data hub, we are able to also analyze some data and put in an appropriate manner that is easy to digest, or at least we hope is easy to digest. The next purpose is also for statewide evaluations. The Data Hub also supports these efforts. Under this Every Student Succeeds Act, each state must also engage in statewide evaluation activities, so we want to make sure we're doing that. It also is an opportunity to ask more specific questions than just the ones that are asked at the federal level. And here, the statewide evaluators often also engage in activities related to assessing the impacts of the 21st CCLC program. Lastly, the third purpose of the Data Hub is also to support local continuous improvement efforts. The Data Hub is a system where programs can go in, you can check in data and the different statuses, review attendance in the program, and examine activities that are being offered. These are useful points so we can understand what's happening at a local level and identify potential areas of improvement going forward. So the Data Hub allows us to do these three things listed here. Kind of as mentioned in the previous slide, the Data Hub allows us to access the impacts of the programs, which are typically carried out of the statewide evaluation level. We can also monitor and refine programming, which can be done at a federal and local level. And we can also support our learning about how programs are operating, which are done at all three levels. So I also want to go through a quick demo, which I think is kind of the most fun part here. So I'm going to take you guys to the Data Hub. So one of the first things that you should see when you go into the page is a login page, and you're just going to go ahead and put in your credentials. My screen is going to look a little bit different than what you guys will have since I have different schools listed here, but to go forward, just to understand what you will be seeing, I think it will be a good way to illustrate its purpose. So after you log in, you'll be taken to the Data Hub overview page. This is where you'll be presented with a list of your sub-guarantees, and that could be a school district or a different school typically. And so we'll list all those sub-guarantees that you're associated with. And I kind of just want to point out here our main menu ribbon. You'll find here a reporting tab where you can basically see a bunch of information in each of these hyperlinks, and it will take you to the data being presented in a succinct, very nice manner. Next will be the administration, and you should be able to manage some of your own users' informations for the people who are being able to go into the Data Hub. Next, I want to go into the resources tab and touch with it a little bit just to show this is basically where if you have any questions on how to use the Data Hub, they should be able to be answered here. We have a really extensive user manual here that should help walk you through how to use the Data Hub. And if this isn't, if we need a more illustrative version of how to use it, we also have different recorded webinars that will show you the different aspects of the Data Hub that are most used. If you want to walk through it, we do have, again, a more extensive training, I believe, coming that should help walk through it, but this should be a good place to answer any questions if you've forgotten anything. But if those sections do not answer any of your questions, we also do have a help desk that you can contact at any point. If it's related to the help desk, feel free to email this email here. But if you have any other questions that are more similar to like what constitutes a family activity, that should be referred to your State Department person here that should be able to answer that. And then we have also Sam's information here if you want to direct any questions to her. So I'm going to go back to the home page and go back to the Data Overview Hub. And I will talk a little bit more about what you guys should be doing and seeing with us. And I'm going to go to our example school here. So you have two sections. You have the data submission and the surveys. I'm going to quickly go through surveys since it's a little bit easier or shorter right now. The surveys right now aren't active. They should be active in the springtime. So we typically administer these teacher surveys as listed here in late March through early May. And when they are active, there will be a big button that says teacher survey or something related to that matter. But until then, you will not see the teacher survey button. But when that comes up, that's where you'll be able to find it. And then where you will be spending the majority of your time will be at the data submission page. So with the data submission page, you'll see your sub-guaranteer's name here and the necessary contact information like your project director, the address, and some additional details about the sub-guarantee. Underneath that, you should see your different centers. And with the different centers that are associated with this sub-guarantee, there'll be a series of questions and modules that we'll be asking you to complete, which are all listed here, as you can see. We ask that you start with general operations, since a lot of the information here is going to be kind of necessary for the other information going forward. I also want to point out the youth participation data and the adult family member participation section. So under the youth data section, we'll ask about enrollment rosters first, and then its daily attendance and a few other questions, and then we'll have similar askings for the adult family member section. Okay, so for the future important dates, they are listed here on the screen. So we're currently in the process of rolling the system over from last year's reporting from the 2021 year to the current 2022 year. So in addition to that, we are adding the programs to the system and setting up different user accounts for the project directors, and we anticipate that the system will be available shortly after Labor Day. And new project directors should be receiving an email to the system when it has opened. And again, where to find help, and those two main tabs with the resource page of the Data Hub with the users manual and the recorded webinar and training will be a great way to have some questions answered. But we are also always here. So if you forget our email, you can always find it at the Need Help page of the Data Hub. And if we have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, I don't think we have any right now, but they can contact me, or you've given your email address, and thank you so much. Thank you all so much for that brief overview of the Data Hub. And I know the project directors are so new, so this is all new to them, but there will be some formal trainings coming up soon where we will take time to walk, well, not me, the experts will take time to walk you through step by step of what needs to be done. So thank you so much again for giving that information to them and to us. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, project directors, we're at the end now of our training for today. Does anyone have any questions that we may not have answered already? It can be from earlier this morning or up until this point. Now is your time to ask any questions that you might still have lingering that has not been answered yet. All right, well, while you ponder that, I know that there is an evaluation. I'm not sure if we put it in the chat box already. If we have not, then we'll probably just go ahead and email it to you separately. Let's see, is there anything that I may have omitted? Okay, there's the link. They just put the link in the chat box to the evaluation. I think we've covered everything. Again, thank you all so much for your time. And hopefully I feel assured that you're off to a great start with your programs. Again, we are here to help you in any way that we can to ensure that you have a successful year. And if there aren't any other questions or comments from my team, then I am going to bid you farewell. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a great weekend. Thank you so much.